Well, we'll see how that transpires, and obviously we'll continue to talk about Peter Wright as the year goes on. But that's not the only thing that we're trying to see how it transpires, because the race for the European Championship is now more than half done. 8 of the events already completed, and attention will now start to turn to the race for the European Championships. How do you assess that race to Dortmund as things currently stand?
Yeah, I've got the European Tour Order of Merit in front of me here, that with the provisional prize money added for the qualifiers that we've had for the events coming up. That's courtesy of our friends at dartsrankings.com. I'm sure many of our listeners are following that site already, but there's no real surprises at the top of that list. Dave Chisnell won 2 of these Euro Tour titles and made a final at the weekend. He's sitting in that number 1 spot, followed by Michael Van Gerwen's, Gerwyn Price's, Johnny Clayton's, Michael Smith's. And when I was thinking of this list earlier, the one name that sprung to mind that I was going to look for straight away was Ross Smith. He is the reigning European Championship title holder, if you like, from last year. And at the time, we were calling him the most surprising winner of a PDC major. And I think that accolade has been taken over by Andrew Gilden now after the UK Open. But Ross, he did go on to win our Upset of the Year award last year. And I think back to just how impressive he was that week in Germany to win that title. And yeah, straight away, he's a name that I was looking at to see how is he getting on for that lineup for Dortmund and trying to defend that title. And as someone who's not in that Pro Tour top 16, he's not far off it. I think around 18 or 19 now. So he's actually getting close to being seeded for these events. But all of this year, he's had to go through those qualifiers for the Euro Tours. And we already know how much pressure is on players to win through those, because you've got so many established names that are having to go to these qualifiers, that you've got your James Wade's, Gary Anderson, he started playing in a few more of them now as well. Christoph Ratajski, you've got players that have been seeded in the past for these events having to go to these qualifiers. And every credit to Ross Smith, because he's qualified for 7 out of the 10 so far, and he is sitting 22nd on that Order of Merit provisionally. So good to see that he's well on the way to qualifying for the European Championship. And looking below Ross, you've got 10 players occupying those last 10 provisional spots in the field. 8 of them weren't in the field for the European Championship last year, and you've got players that are trying to get back in, the likes of Raymond van Barneveld, Steve Beaton, Brendan Dolan, Ian White. And then you've got some potential debutants, the likes of Matt Campbell, Jim Williams, Ricardo Pietrexco and Dylan Slevin, around £1,000 off it. He's a new tour card holder for this year, so he's pretty close to getting involved in that as well. And I mentioned some of the more established names having to go through the qualifiers. You've got your James Wade's in there, Christoph Ratajski's there outside those spots at the moment. And for someone like James Wade, who after this past weekend, he's dropped down to world number 16, he's fighting for his life at the moment to stay in that top 16. And if he is going to miss major events like the European Championship, possibly the Grand Slam, he missed that one last year, then he's not just going to be worried about his top 16 place, but maybe after the World Championship, his top 32 place, that could come under real threat. So who would have thought that could happen so quickly? But it is a possibility if you start missing some of these big events. But yeah, looking at the overall race, we've just had that run of 4 straight Euro Tour weekends. They're now going to be spread out a bit more evenly. We've got one at the end of May, one at the end of June going into July, and then the last 3 September, October time. So still 5 more events to go. I think we're probably going to focus more on it after we've got the World Match Play race, the World Cup race for a few players, and the Grand Prix as well. But yeah, I think some players, they are going to have half an eye on it now. We could see some of the top players high up on that list start to skip some of these events towards the back end of the year, be a bit more selective now that they look like they're qualified. And who knows how much of an effect that could have on players then being seeded for these events, and that could push them into the field as well.
It's tough to talk about this when 3 of the 5 events, we still don't know who's going to be in the field, because there haven't been the qualifiers for the last 3 European Tour events, but there have been for the next 2. And obviously there's still a lot of time, there's still a bit of time to go, but there's a bit of a gap right now between, let's say, the players in 28th and the player in 33rd, adding the 1,250 pounds for the qualifiers for the next 2. Ian White is currently in 28th place. He's qualified for all but 2 of them, but he hasn't won many matches. But he's 3,500 pounds clear of a 3-way tie for 33rd. that's not a safe gap. You're probably going to need 16, 17, maybe even 18,000 pounds when it's all said and done, because of how much money there goes for winning a match. But maybe not. Maybe you'll get in with on the lower end of that. And White, a couple more qualifications and maybe a win or two will get him there. He still has work to do, but he's in a very good position. It looks more like there's 4 spots to play. Of those 4, Gabriel Clemens, he's not qualified for the next 2. But that's because he's going to be one of the home nation players, so he's automatically there. He has to win a match for the money to count, but that would be, if he wins a match, 2,500. That lifts him to 14,000. Same for Ricardo Pietreczko. He's currently the last person in, but he's going to be one of those home nation qualifiers. That's, again, a huge opportunity. Winning a match at either of those is 2,500 pounds. Winning it at both, that's 5,000 pounds, even if he goes out next match. That would get him, if he wins both of those, very close to that magic number of 16,000, 17,000 pounds. The other people right there, Chris Dobie, he's not qualified for either of the next 2. Jim Williams, he's qualified for just 1. They're currently inside, but their lead is not by much, with Simon Whitlock, who's qualified for both, just outside it. Kim Hybrex, he's qualified for one of them, just outside as well. It's going to really come down, I think, to those last 3 qualifiers, because if you can win through those, if you can do what Ian White's done so far, that's 3,750 pounds up for stake, just in what is in essence a match behind closed doors, or a set of matches behind closed doors. You win 2 or 3 matches in a row for those 3 qualifiers, and you're there, and that's a lot of money, and that's going to decide who. I shouldn't say it's going to decide. It's going to go a long way towards deciding who is going to be there. But, there's other players who aren't safe yet. Steve Beaton, even. Beaton trying to get to the World Match Play after 2 years out, trying to get to the World Grand Prix after 2 years out, trying to get to the European Championships after a few years out. He's right there as well. Right now, 14,750. He's in one of the next 2. Again, just a couple. Winning a match there and maybe winning a qualifier will probably get him there. Might even get him winning a match of the next one, might get him to the World Match Play as well. But then there's also that race for higher seeding, and that's where I want to leave off on this. Dave Chisnell, currently the top seed because he's won 2 of these, but Michael Van Garen is right there. Gezi, who's missed the last couple Euro Tours after deciding to withdraw from the qualifiers, is next at 3rd. All of them are within 1 title of one another. And that race to be that top seed, I think is going to go all the way. Chizzy is playing really well. Obviously, 2 titles, a final, back-to-back finals, winning half of those finals. He won the last Euro Tour last year as well. Maybe this is that year where he really establishes himself on the big stage. We know he's won Euro Tours before. He's made a lot of finals on televised events, but he's never put together this many good runs in front of a big crowd and been this consistent in front of a big crowd. But he has a lot of really tough players. The world number 3, the world number 4, the world number 6, and the world number 1 all breathing down his neck. That race for the top seed is going to be really interesting over the next few months. And I could see any one of those 5, or even Dirk van Dijvenbode or Luke Humphries, getting it together and lifting themselves to become that top seed for Dortmund.